In this step, let's understand what is the difference between a session scoped variable and a request scoped variable. In our earlier steps, we set a lot of parameters into request. We set a lot of attributes into request. So we'll start doing that again. So what I'll do is I'll start setting the attribute into request in here. So I'll set an attribute request dot set attribute. It's a valid user. I'm setting the name into the request. That's what we are doing in here. Now in the todo.jsp, once this is done, I'm going to the todo.jsp and I'm displaying the name. This is exactly what we did earlier as well. So I would put in a div or a p and I'll say welcome $name. So we are using EL to display the value of the name. So in login servlet, just before it redirects the response to todo.do, I'm setting an attribute in the request and I'm trying to display that value in the todo.jsp. Will that work? Let's go to login.do, login again. You would see that the username is not really displayed. What is happening in here is we actually started from the login servlet and we redirected it to the todo.do. Once we do a redirect to todo.do, it would start creating a new request. Each URL, each request from the server side is supposed to be an individual thing on its own. So let's see that in action in here. I'm going to again going to login.do. Carefully watch what's happening in the network tab. So when I typed in login.do, a get request is sent and I'm getting a screen where I'm able to enter the in 28 minutes and which is dummy. And I'm pressing enter, login, and you see that there are actually two different requests which are being created. The first request is post. So the post request login.do, what did it do? It caused a redirect. 302 is a redirect. So what happened is when we did a login, what happens? The user was successful, so we did a redirect to todo.do. So this sent a 302. So this is one request. When we set attribute in here, when we did a request.set attribute, we are setting an attribute into this particular request. The next request which are sent, get todo.do, this attribute will not be sent along. So whatever request attributes which are there in the earlier request are lost by the time the next request is sent. And that's the reason why in the JSP, even though I'm using name, it's not being displayed. So it says welcome blank because it's not able to find the value for name. So that's the reason why it's coming up as empty, because there are two requests which are involved. Actually, when you look at a sequence of web application flows, so for example, the one which we are doing in here, login.do, this is the first request. Now, you see two more requests. Until now, we saw a total of 1 plus 2 requests. And if user continues to interact with this application, he creates more and more requests. Anything which you put into the request scope. So if you do a request.set attribute, that attribute is only available in the scope of this particular request. Once user clicks a new page or once this servlet redirects to another servlet, whatever parameters that come into this particular request are no longer available. And if I want to retain things across requests, so let's say I want to retain a few things across the requests. So who has logged in is something I would want to really retain across the different requests. So if I want to do something of that kind, I should use session. Session is something which starts when a user logs in and expires when a user logs out. So the entire session basically is starting from the user login to the user logout. Sometimes there's something called a session timeout, which is the maximum inactive period for a user. If a user does not do anything for 5 minutes, the session could be timed out. So you don't really need to log out, but the session would automatically be killed. That's what you would see on some of the banking websites also. Your session is going to expire. Click something to do, keep it active. I mean, something of that kind you would see. What you are really keeping inactive there is your web application session. a session is valid across a number of requests, and if you put something in your session, then it's available across different requests. So what we'll do now is we'll try and put the name into session. How do I put something into session? It's very, very simple. So instead of doing request.setAttribute, I would do request.getSession.setAttribute. That's it. It's as simple as that. Now we are setting the to-dos into the session. That's not really a good thing to do. What we want to set into the session is something which is valid across this session, and the thing which is valid across sessions in here is the username. Once a user logs in, his user ID's credentials will not change. So let's go to the login servlet and let's set the attribute name into session. So request.getSession.setAttribute name. That's basically what we are doing. The context has reloaded, and let's go ahead and start with the login again. So I'll do login in 28 minutes. Now you see that the income 28 minutes came in. Even though there are two requests, because we put something in session, we put the attribute name in session, it is retained across all the requests. So even if I refresh the page, the in 28 minutes remains. So even if I reload the to do again, because this in 28 minutes is coming from the session and not from the request, it is already there. So always think about what you should put in the request scope and what you should put in the session scope. Things which will not change across the application should be put in session. Also think about your session size. Any object that you put in the session would be live throughout the session of the user. So it would occupy memory on your application server. So you should put as less number of things in session as possible. And if you want something only for that particular request, then put it in the request scope and not in the session scope. So that's basically a very simple discussion on request versus session. Until the next step, bye-bye.
Thanks for joining more than 1 million students who are learning from us. At In 28 Minutes, we defined a learning roadmap for Java and front-end developers. We created more than 25 courses covering all the topics that you are seeing on the screens. There are 4 things you can do to make best use of these courses. Number 1 is Udemy. You'll find a link in the description of the video to our Udemy profile. We are teaching a lot of courses on Udemy and most of them are free. Number 2, visit our website www.in28minutes.com. You'd find tons of information including how you can register for our trainings and the link to Udemy and our GitHub code as well. Number 3, visit our GitHub repository. With more than 20 repositories covering varied examples, it's a comprehensive source of information and code. Last but not the least, you'll find a set of discount codes for all our Udemy courses in the description as well. Feel free to use them. Good luck from the team here at In 28 Minutes, your destination for high quality step-by-step courses.